Welcome to The Stacks, a podcast about books and the people who read them. I'm your host, Tracy Thomas, and it's The Stacks Book Club Day, and it is the last week of National Poetry Month, and I am thrilled to welcome back Nate Marshall, author of the poetry collections Wild Hundreds and Finna. Today, we discussed Doppelgangbanger by Chicago poet Cortney Lamar Charleston. Doppelgangbanger is an exploration of imposed versus self-defined American Black masculinity and its intersections with family and community, about how rigid form actually is in poetry. And I ask Nate the ever important question, what makes a poem good? Quick reminder, everything we talk about on each episode of The Stacks can be found in the link to the show notes. And stay tuned till the end of this episode to find out what our May book club pick will be. Listen, if you love the show and want more of it, join the Stacks Pack, our exclusive community for all you book lovers out there. We have an awesome Discord community, monthly virtual book club conversations, and bonus episodes. Plus, you get discounts on merch and a lot more. Not to mention, The Stacks is an entirely independent podcast, which means everything you hear is produced by me and my incredible team, and we cannot do it without your support. So if you want to get involved in making sure this podcast happens every single week, plus earn those awesome perks, head to patreon.com/thestacks. And of course, it's time for shout outs to some of our newest members of the Stacks Pack: Jessica Wright, Jean, Cindy Cherry, Amanda Hartman, Joelle Chappell-Wygant, Sally R., Glenda Nelms, and Sarah Rousey. Thank you all so much, and thank you to the entire Stacks Pack. All right, now it's time for my chat with Nate Marshall about Doppelgangbanger by Cortney Lamar Charleston for the Stacks Book Club. All right, everybody, it is book club day. We are talking about Doppelgangbanger by Cortney Lamar Charleston. We're joined again by everyone's new favorite poet, in case you didn't know that you loved him after this first week of the month's episode. I now know you all are obsessed with him like I am. It is poet, playwright, professor. I like to do the alliteration there. It's Nate Marshall. Welcome back.
What's up? It's good to be back.
I'm so happy to have you back. I'm so excited to talk about this poetry collection because I weirdly had a lot of thoughts. Like, I feel like I'm like have things to talk about, which with poetry, normally I'm like, I'm not going to have anything to talk about, but I took a lot of notes, have a lot of questions. But we'll start with you where we always start, which is sort of like generally, what did you think of the book?
Yeah, I mean, so, I blurbed this book when it came out, and I
noticed.
Yeah. And I should also say Cortney is someone who I've liked a lot for years. We actually met at summer camp.
Okay.
At least before he was a writer. I think I was writing at that point. And so he's like someone who I've had a chance to sort of follow and see grow over the years. And yeah, I really love this book. It's kind of like a joy to read. And I think in a lot of ways, one of the things that I like about it is it does the thing that certainly Cortney as a person does, but I think a lot of folks, and especially a lot of I think folks who I find a kind of closeness to do, which is find a way to balance serious or complex topics and also still get a joke off.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So constantly in the space of the poems, it's, we're talking about something serious. We're thinking about some real shit, but then there's a little pun, or there's even even the title, right? The title is funny, right? It's one of the things that sort of makes you lean in about the thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's why I picked the book. I was like, we got to read this. The title's too good to pass up. Okay. I agree with you. I liked the humor. I'll be honest. I could not get into this collection until the second section.
Okay.
But I realized what my problem was and I fixed it. And then I really liked it. So I started reading the poetry collection like one reads most things, silently to myself in bed in a very low stakes way. And then I kept falling asleep. At nighttime I was tired. I kept sort of dozing off or catching my mind wandering. And then the next day I was like, I'm going to read this book in the bath. And so I got in the bath and I got to section 2 and I started reading them out loud. And then I was like, holy shit, I get it now. Like the
Mm,
use of consonants, the wordplay that just like sort of doesn't like reading out loud for me often really brings things to life, which I should know about myself. But like for whatever reason, I didn't think to do that with this collection. But as soon as I did, like the rhythm became instantly clear. The poems are like fast. Like I wanted to read them really fast. And like I'm assuming he comes from that tradition of like spoken word that we talked about before. But like
mhm.
all of that all of a sudden became really clear. The jokes became more clear. The playfulness became more clear. And then I was like really hooked and I was noticing things that I hadn't noticed. Like, for example, the still life of like the different rap album covers.
Mhm.
I understood it. The first one's like Kanye, it's Dropout or whatever. And I was like, oh, he's talking about the Dropout Bear. Like, oh, I know. And then the next three I totally missed. And then it wasn't until I was reading it out loud that I was like, oh, he's talking about Common, or like, oh, I know this album. And like, so for me, once I started reading it out loud and got a little bit like started taking it less seriously, I liked it so much more.
Mhm.
So I that was sort of my big like that was like my
Yeah.
overall experience with it. It was like the reading it loud because there's so many consonants in
Yeah.
these poems.
Well, I
It's
think
like rap music.
yeah, Courtney has a real great like ear
Hmm.
that comes through in these poems. But I'm thinking about the way that it's like what we were talking about before we started rolling about how I think people think of poetry as a very serious art form, and some of that
Hmm.
is something that poets cultivate intentionally or has been cultivated intentionally around poetry, right?
Right.
So like there's all this stuff around poetry being like the sort of the intellectual art form or the intellectual literature, right? It is
Right.
like a society that doesn't have poetry is not a society that is mature, or all this kind of
Right.
weirdness or whatever, which like I'm like not deeply invested
Right.
in as a thing. But like the thing that I think that misses is that the stuff is fun, and there's a way
Yeah.
that like with novels we're allowed to like have fun, to be like, wow, this novel is really funny, it is deeply entertaining. Even if we don't think of that stuff as quote unquote high literature, like literary fiction,
Right.
even there's
Right.
a lot of literary fiction that's like legit funny as hell or whatever. I think about someone like
Yeah.
Matt Johnson or whomever, right?
Right. Like the sellout.
Right. Paul Beatty is, yeah, I mean, right. This sort of tradition of satire, right? From what's the brother name?
George Schuyler.
Black No More. Yeah, Skylar. All
Yeah,
the
George Schuyler.
up to Beatty
Yeah.
and Johnson, all these folks. But like that exists in poetry too, right? And like, but I think that this is the thing, right? And this is the thing that I think I really like about this book, and why its engagement with hip hop and with music broadly is interesting to me, is I think that a lot of the fun energy of poetry in the kind of in the 20th century maybe departed poetry and went to music, especially when
Mm,
we like started when these like very very text heavy musics became sort of dominant, like hip hop, like
yeah.
certain kinds of pop music and certain kinds of R&B that just have a lot of words in them, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of like the people who in a different period would have been like the sort of fun poets, right? The sort of fun and popular poets, like they write pop songs, which is cool, which I'm not mad at, but
Right.
yeah.
But this felt to me like when I once I started reading it out loud, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is rap music." Like the use of like
Mm,
consonants, the use of like a rhyme within a rhyme, or like the line would have like rhymes within, not at the end, like you think of like a poem or like a sonnet or whatever, like, but like rhymes throughout that worked, or like similar sounds throughout. And then all these like referential moments. Like that's one of my favorite things about rap is like when a rapper references something and I'm like, oh, I know what they're talking about.
hmm
Or like, oh, Drake will like talk about a basketball player or whatever. And I'm like, oh yes, Chef Curry with the pot. I'm familiar. I'm a big Warriors fan. Like, and so
There's,
this had that of like, I'm not explaining any of these references to you. And if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. And if you don't, it's totally over your
yeah,
head and we're not going back and I'm never bringing it up
yeah,
again. And for me, that is like so like Lil Wayne does that so much, right? Like where
absolutely,
he'll reference like some little thing and then he'll go and dig into the sounds and he'll use the same word three different
yeah,
ways with different spellings. And like Cortney does that a bunch in this
yeah.
book. Like he'll use the same, like, I mean, of course, the guzzle, the gazelle. How do you say that word? I
Huzzle,
don't know. Okay.
guzzle, gazal,
Guzzle, whatever.
that
The
work.
Jumpman poem.
Yeah,
Like, of course, that one just felt like so
Hmm.
like put a beat under that, that shit slaps all day, every day. Like
Absolutely.
I'm interested. So
Absolutely.
like I definitely felt that like hip hop influence. And I hate to say it because I feel like it's like hip hop because it's a black poet. And I don't, and it's not that
Sure.
at all,
Yeah. But
obviously.
no, he's
Like
literally
this
writing about a
really
lot of
felt
that.
like hip
Right.
hop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. He's writing about hip hop albums. He's writing, like, I could feel so much like influence of rap music. And I
Mhm.
felt like as soon as I started saying it out loud, I could hear the music in the poetry, which sometimes I take a poem out loud and I'm still like, I have no fucking clue what this person's talking about. But these like came alive to me in a way that I was really surprised
Right.
about.
I mean, to that thing of like thinking about it almost as like an album, or thinking about it in the conversation with rap music. One of the things that I think this also shares with rap is like, for me, like rap is many things, but one of the things it is kind of like it's the form of, in particular, black coming of age, and especially sort of black
Mm,
masculine coming of age, right? So think like think about so many of the sort of like great or canonical rap albums, right? Biggie's Ready to Die, Pac's Me Against the World, Nas's Illmatic, College Dropout, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. Like a lot of these joints are really about this sort of coming of age, right? And even albums
mm.
that aren't exactly that, like something, like what I like to call like Jay-Z's like late Tim Duncan era 444. That's him. It's a kind of album thinking about his own maturation, right? And that's
Sure.
like exactly what this book is kind of doing, right? It's wrestling with
It
like
is.
what that means, what it means to just like grow up in a particular
Yeah.
time in a particular place.
And you were totally like in my head as I was reading this, obviously, because we just talked like that day. And I kept thinking about first poets
Hmm.
and how, like, if you're a young black dude and Courtney Lamar Charleston is your first poet, you fucking love poetry for the rest of your life.
Hmm.
Like, you're chasing this book because he is speaking so specifically to young black men. And because, as we sort of talked about last time a little bit, like there is this shift in the book towards like this suburban
Yeah.
young black man. Like I think in the earlier part that's not as explicit, or maybe he moved at some point in his life. I don't exactly know, but that's sort of the
Hmm.
sense that I got. But like there is a range to black experience in this book where it feels like whether you are suburban, urban, or maybe even rural, like there are poems in here that speak to you. And I just kept thinking, like, wow, if this was my first poetry collection, like maybe I wouldn't think of white men in nature so much when
Sure.
someone says poem. Like it just, this is like
Yeah.
I don't know. It was like it was an exciting read for me.
Yeah.
He seems also like, I don't know if maybe that's just because the poems are about coming of age. He seemed very young to me also, like a younger
Sure.
person. I don't know how old he is, but I was like, oh, he's like a 25-year-old poet. Like he just had like a very young energy. But
Sure.
again, that could just be because like he was talking about earlier iterations of himself.
Sure.
We talked about this a little bit last week, but I want you to give me a definitive answer. What makes a poem good? Is there such thing as like an objectively good poem? Is there such thing as a agreed upon thing that makes a poem good, or is that really just like up to the reader and the critics?
That's a good question. There are certain critics who would say yes, there is an objective, or certain sort of readers of poetry would say yes, there's an objectively good thing. I don't really think there is, right? Like, there's a book that's actually about more about fiction, but like I think most of it kind of applies to poetry. This book called "Craft in the Real World" by Matthew Salasis, and like in
Mm,
that joint, he's sort of talking about the ways in which craft is all about culture, right? So the things that we think of as good writing are entirely shaped and informed by our cultural context, right? And so what is effective writing in, mid-century Cold War United States could be quite different than what constitutes good or evocative writing in 18th century Japan, or whatever, right?
right, right, right.
And I think that's really true. There is this like I don't know. I'm like taking a class right now, which is sort of strange
Okay.
and fun. So in this class, one of the things we've been talking about is this thing called new criticism, right? Which is this like literary. It's sort of unimportant if you like sleep through this part of your English classes. No one's ever going to get at you about it. It's fine.
Okay.
But it's this way of reading literature that sort of comes into vogue in like the middle part of the 20th century. And the whole idea of it is we just close read the text. We don't
Oh, yes.
think about biographical details. We don't think about the sort of wider context out of which the work emerges. It's just words on a page, and that has to sort of stand alone on its own, right? Respectfully, that don't make no damn sense. Because words are actually cultural artifacts, right? Like,
sure.
I mean, period. Like the fact of language, or even the fact of like language being written down, like the notation of language versus language being a sort of abstract, verbal or physical thing that we do.
Right.
That's all cultural. But the thing that people don't think about in terms of like new criticism, I promise I'm gonna like.
No, I'm so
winding up.
curious. You're
Like,
doing great. You're doing great.
the thing that people don't think about is a lot of the guys who were early in starting that were also like avowed kind of white supremacists and segregationists.
I was just going to ask about that.
and this was coming up in this moment where two things were sort of happening, like coming out of the 1920s and 30s. What do you have? You have like the New Negro moment, the Harlem Renaissance, and you have this moment where people, where there's a lot of this kind of like socialist, social movement literature, this literature of the quote unquote masses, right? And so a lot of 20th century literature, including like, the kind of graduate program that I went to, an MFA program, that whole thing comes out of this moment that is all about sort of a rejection of a certain kind of social critique, and instead about like literature as a sort of terrain of like the rugged individual. And like, that's fine, I guess. Like, that's one way of doing it. But we should just understand that like that way of understanding literature has a political agenda. And so, right. And that's just like one agenda that we don't necessarily have to subscribe to. But one of the things that I do really love about this book too, to sort of come back to it, is what you were saying, right? The kind of suburbanness of this, right? Because I think that, since we're not new critics and we can like think about the world as it actually is, right? The reality of like America is that we have this vision of Black people as a sort of fundamentally urban population, and that is really kind of antiquated, right? Like, and is increasingly more so, right? So like where I'm from in Chicago, right, which is, where Cortney is also kind of coming out of, right? The city of Chicago has lost hundreds of thousands of Black people in the last few decades, right? And but where have all those people gone? Well, some of them have like left the area entirely, but a lot of them have gone to these suburbs, right? And so this is a fundamental part of, if you want to understand something of a singular Black experience or the Black experience writ large in these larger dynamics of the country, the region, whatever, like you have to think like meaningfully about the suburbs. It can't just be the sort of quote unquote inner city story.
Right. Okay. There's two things I want to touch back on, and I don't know if I'm going to remember. Remind me that I want to come back to suburbs if I forget.
Yeah.
About the new what is it? New criticism?
Yeah.
I feel like, first of all, Imani Perry talks about this in South to America.
Oh,
have you gotten there yet?
Yeah. I haven't gotten there.
I think she does. No. I feel like she does. I can't remember. But when you said it, I was like, that reminds me of Imani Perry. Anyways, I feel like what's so interesting about what you're saying about that is like, that, of course, is a type of criticism of art. And I think that it, from what you're saying and like from my small understanding, it also was like in the theater, in music, and like all sorts of art. But also it feels very much like politically right now what a lot of like Republican, conservative, right-wing, white supremacist organizations and groups are doing with like the current quote unquote culture wars.
Sure.
Like this callback of like, we want to get rid of affirmative action. We don't want to say gay in our schools. Like, we want to take all of the context out of everything and therefore bring it back to neutral. But of course, neutral in this country is straight, white, cis, able-bodied, healthy, all of those things. And like that what's happening now is of a tradition from like of this time after, or pre and post sort of World War II and then obviously Reconstruction and like that this is a response to a political moment and not just like, oh, let's think about art in a different way. It's like, no, this actually is connected to other things and like that it's coming back again in the banned books and all that stuff, I think is just like so interesting, because I think in 2022 a lot of people are obsessed with the current moment and forget about the historical context of so many things. And like, this is part of a very American tradition of trying to erase other people's experience on account of purity or art or whatever the thing is.
Yeah.
And then about this like suburbanness is like, I think I'm like being very pop culture. So when people listen to this episode in a year, you're going to be like, what the fuck is this reference? But it's making me think of all this conversation about Russell Wilson this week.
Yeah. Sure. Like, is he corny? Is he not corny?
Is he corny? Is he not corny? You know, is Sierra a gold digger, as if she doesn't have her own money, but like, fine, sure, go off, like whatever. But I think that like there is a feeling among, I think, some Black people and many white people that like being from the suburbs makes you less Black or more corny or all of these things. And I think to your point of what you were saying is like, there's a lot of fucking Black people in the suburbs for a lot of reasons, including, you know, white migration back into urban centers and, you know, all of those issues. But I think it's interesting that there's so many Black writers and creators who are from the suburbs and who were raised in the suburbs or lived in the suburbs for part of their lives or went to school there, and that they don't talk about that. And so it allows this like stereotype of the suburbs being like for sellouts, even though there's so many Black people there. And like, it's very much a base for Black people, just like urban centers are, just like rural communities are. And I just wonder, like, why do you think more Black people don't embrace that if that is their story?
That's a great question. Wow, damn. You know, there's this really great scholar who I believe is at Northwestern named Mary Patillo, and she has this book called Black Picket Fences, and it's sort of about the Black middle class. And I think about that book a lot. And then, you know, like even like going all the way back, there's E. Franklin Frazier, who's like an old school sociologist, has this book called The Black Bourgeoisie, right? Or even like Our Kind of People, right? This kind of so this sort of question of class and how class functions within Blackness. I think one of the reasons why also, let me just say, like, and this is not me trying to sort of like lay down my own Negro credentials or whatever, but like,
You're not from the suburbs.
I'm just not from the suburbs. I know a lot of cats from the suburbs.
I am from a city, but I am from the suburb part of it. I'm from Oakland, but Oakland's a super segregated city. Sure. And I'm from what you might consider the suburbs, or as they're familiarly known, the hills. So I am more of a suburban Black person. Sure. So we have both sides.
Right. So I think that the thing about it is, I think the reason why a lot of Black folks sort of struggle to talk about this in a really meaningful way is a few things. It's kind of like it's a double bind, right? On one hand, like, you understand that there are all these stereotypes about Blackness being kind of urban, right? And being connected to city centers, right? And so to embrace something that is sort of not urban is to feel yourself being less Black. And this is one of the things that like Cortney is getting at in a lot of these poems that I think is really interesting. But I also think like, I think that a lot of, if you grew up in a place, right, the thing about growing up in a place is you didn't choose it, right? And, for a lot of us, like, who had parents in the, 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever, who, left city centers or left wherever and went out to these suburbs, those are really complicated decisions. Those decisions that are motivated by a number of things. And like, in part, right, at least not entirely, but at least in part, those are often decisions that are kind of motivated by notions that we might think of as anti-Black or classist. And so as we grow up and like have a critique of that or have a kind of analysis of that, then I think like people don't necessarily want to, they're not like
throw shade at their parents.
Right. They don't want to throw shade at their parents, but they also like don't want to
admit to being like a product
cop to it, because they're
Yeah.
like, I didn't sign up for that. It was
Right.
just where I happened to be, which
Right.
is like fair. You know, I think
Which
about
is true and fair. Yeah.
yeah, I think about what's his name? Ta-Nehisi Coates' like very first book, The
Mm,
Beautiful Struggle.
the beautiful
Yeah,
struggle.
which people like rarely talk about, but that is actually my favorite Ta-Nehisi book. I like told him this once on Instagram. I was like, yo,
And then he blocked you.
this book is
I'm
my
just
favorite.
kidding.
No, he was like cool. Like he was like, I didn't think
I
motherfuckers
haven't
still
read it
read
yet.
that.
I own it, but I haven't read it. So
Yeah,
I can't
yeah,
weigh
I
in.
really love it, and I taught it in this class about the literature of hip hop. But there's a point in that book in his kind of story where they move from wherever they're living in Baltimore to the county, right?
Mm,
And he has this whole thing, and he's sort of mad, and he's like, you know, whatever. And his dad is kind of like, dog, I'm tired. Like I'm not
right.
like if I can get this little bit of peace of mind about sort of my geography in this way, I'm gonna do that. And
Hmm.
then he kind of finds it like hard to begrudge his father this like little piece of peace.
Right.
Um, so yeah, so I guess I'm just like I just think they're really complicated. I think suburbs are complicated. I think cities are also really complicated. Also, I think we talk poorly about cities, right? Because I mean, like what you're saying about Oakland, you're from Oakland,
I'm
but
from Oakland.
growing up in different parts of Oakland means different things, right?
Yeah.
And that's not
And
always legible.
Oakland is a city that is notorious for people who know nothing about Oakland, sort of in the way Chicago, I'm sure,
Right.
is like notorious for bad, for violent
Right.
things, even though also, I mean, Chicago has a credible history that I probably don't know very much about, but like Oakland is also the home of the Black Panthers and like
Right.
Oakland, like, and like Cal Berkeley is right there. And like all of, all
Right.
of that is like part of the Bay Area history. And, it is, and Oakland has changed so much. And I think people think about Oakland differently now
Right.
than they did when I was a kid. And obviously before I was born, but like, I was born in the 80s and Oakland was Oakland very much in a way that people were scared of in the
Yeah.
90s and 2000s. And like, I even have internalized, like, I'm from Oakland, but like, not that part of Oakland, like, as if it fucking
Sure.
makes a difference, right? Like, but, and then I also like feel guilty, like claiming Oakland because I'm like, I know I'm from the hills. Like, I know it's
Right.
not the same, but like, it is really
Right.
complicated. And especially in a place like Oakland that's like diverse, allegedly, because the Bay Area is diverse, it is, but it is segregated. Like a city like New York is super diverse and super segregated. So I think
Absolutely.
you're right. Like cities become really complicated because they take on certain narratives.
Right. Right. And often with suburbs, just simply because we just don't know those places,
Yeah.
they kind of sidestep some of that. But like, you know, if you're from the Chicagoland area, right, and you're from the city, but you're from say this neighborhood called like the Gold Coast, or you're from
I know
Beverly,
Gold
right,
Coast.
or you're from like certain parts, that means a sort of a different thing, even, you know, in the 90s or 80s, certainly, than if you're from a suburb that's a suburb, yes, but is a suburb like Calumet City or Markham or Harvey, right, that are these very like working class kind of hard scrabble, predominantly black and
Mm,
brown, like these suburbs that, in the same way that city neighborhoods did, experience like really devastating like white flight and intentional divestment, right? Like
right.
arguably, if you're a black person who grew up in a kind of hyper segregated, poor and working class community within the city limits, you have just as much, if not more, in common with someone from Harvey or Markham or wherever than you do with someone who came up downtown.
Right. Well, I think that's the other thing is like the assumption about a suburb is that it's like a white soccer mom
Right.
location.
Right. That
And
it's
like that's just,
fancy. That it.
yeah, that it's fancy, that it's white,
Mhm.
like overwhelmingly white, that it's wealthy, that the schools are better. Like I think that there's a lot of assumptions about
Right.
suburbs that are just not true. In the same way, like I said
Mhm.
before, I have assumptions about a poet, right? Like when I
Yeah.
think of a poem or a
Absolutely.
poet, I think of like this thing that I've been told is what it is.
Yeah.
And obviously the older I get, the more that I learn that a suburb is not that and a
Yeah.
poet is not that and Oakland is not that. And like
Yeah.
it's just that we're told these things and then they're reinforced. And I think like there
Yeah.
is a sense of maybe, I don't want to speak for other people, but I think there is a sense of like shame of admitting that you're from a suburb, right? Like that
Yeah.
that somehow means that you are less Black
Yeah.
or have had an easier life
Yeah.
or have had more privileges, which may or may not be true.
Right.
I mean, not the less Black part. I don't believe in less or
Sure,
more
sure,
Black,
sure,
but
sure, sure. But
whatever. But
the
like,
question of privilege, right? And
right.
I
And that
think
people don't talk about it honestly because of that. And so then these stereotypes
right.
continue on. If more people were Cortney and talking about their experience in the suburbs in their work, we would have more, representation as
Right.
far as like suburban Black experience goes.
Right. But the suburbs in many ways, like when they're imagined, right? When we think of like the sort of history of that, this Levittown kind of lineage, right, of the like mid 20th century and all, and and the tract
Right.
homes and all that, the suburbs are meant to be a utopia, which, and when I say utopia, I mean it in the kind of literal sense. They're meant to be a sort of no place, right?
Right.
And so the ways in which I think like cities and also just like literature that is sort of about, that is really place based, I think that sometimes people struggle to do that well about suburbs because suburbs were cultivated to just not be a place, to be sort of largely interchangeable. So
Mm-hmm.
if I live outside of, Tulsa, Oklahoma, it's not really that different than if I live outside of Dallas, than if I live outside of Chicago, than if I live outside of Oakland, than if I live outside of Milwaukee. It's simply a
Right.
matter of
Right.
like climate preference and like where someone's job happens to be. It's not really.
Right.
But the other thing too that I'm thinking about in terms of talking about this sort of like Black suburban like shame that I think Cortney is like doing real work deconstructing. I think that part of it is all these sort of antiquated class assumptions that we have about suburbs and suburbs versus cities, right? That
Mm-hmm.
one, just aren't really true, but two, or aren't really true maybe anymore. But two, I think one of the reasons why a lot of Black writers or just writers of color broadly who come out of those spaces feel resistant to naming themselves as suburban, and then will kind of like move to city centers and then sort of claim that or what have you, is because often within those spaces, they are sort of class marginal. And
Mm.
so they don't feel like they're like, there's this thing where it's like, okay, yeah, like I came up in this kind of like fancy suburb, right? But I didn't actually have access to those things. And in some ways, in fact, it was even worse because like I had, like I had to sort of suffer the indignity of like witnessing classmates with so much and knowing that I did not have that versus if we were just in a community
Right.
where everyone is sort of like, this is where we're at. Everyone is sort of working class in this way.
Right. And I feel like when Black folks are in suburban communities that are mostly Black working class, which often happens outside of city centers, they don't refer to themselves as being suburban. They refer to themselves as being from outside the city,
right?
Which is like a different turn. And I feel like oftentimes when Black people say they're from the suburbs, that they're actually like signaling that they were the only Black person in their community, right? Like they were from like a white place. Because when I, again, think about the Bay Area, people know Oakland, San Francisco, San Jose, but there's a bunch of other cities and towns and stuff that are, I guess, suburbs. I don't think of them that way. I guess Calabasas is a suburb of Los Angeles. I don't think about it that way because, I live here, but I don't live in Calabasas, but I like live down here. But like, I'm thinking like a place like Richmond, California.
Right.
People don't call that a suburb, but that's a Black as fuck suburb,
Richmond,
right?
Like I was thinking about Richmond. I was thinking about the brother Kugler. Like he's from out there.
Oh yeah,
like, he has a lot of family.
He's from yeah.
And
he's from Oakland, I think.
I think so, but again, right? Like
But
he's
people from Oakland have
Oakland,
family in Richmond.
has family in Richmond, sort of
Yeah,
go back and forth. And this is like part of the thing that Cortney's even talking about. And I think this is why like you were like in that first section, it's not entirely clear to me,
right, where
we're located,
is.
right?
Yeah.
And so a thing that I think is maybe different about the way that class functions amongst Black folks and amongst African Americans, like versus maybe other communities in the country, is like it's rare that like you're that far removed from
Yes.
from folks who are like working class, struggling with however we want to sort of term it, right? Whatever kind of euphemism we want to use that day. So there's a kind of like there's a proximity to certain shit. Whether or not we're like comfortable with that and whether or not we like talk to those people, there is a proximity that we have to reckon with. We have to make certain decisions
Yeah.
about. And I don't know that that's true in the same way of like, I know white families where like no one's poor. No
Right.
one's poor. Everyone has a good job. Everyone went to college.
Right.
They
Right.
just
Right.
did.
Right.
I don't
Right.
I don't know a black family where that is true.
That's the case. Right.
Maybe
Of
like
course.
that nuclear family, like that specific nuclear.
Sure.
But
But
like,
like extended.
right, there's some uncle or there's some cousin or there's whatever.
Yeah.
You don't got to go
Yeah.
that far and be like, oh, okay, word, like this is where we're at. And I think this is part of the thing about like that hesitation towards like embracing the suburban piece
Mm-hmm.
is
Because
if
it's not as much like an identity
right,
for a Black person, because like your cousin or your aunt or whatever, who you see all the time, whose kids you fuck with regularly, who are your best
right,
friends and all of that things, are like, it doesn't feel as all encompassing as like a
right,
suburban lifestyle
right.
might for a white
You're
family.
going back there for church or for family stuff or
Right.
whatever. And
Right.
also, like, I mean, this is not even like talking about feelings, like this is just a fact. Like black people being black middle classness is far more tenuous and far less stable than white middle
Right.
classness. And so there is a real sense of like, okay, yeah, but I can't mess it up because we could
Right.
end up right back to wherever it is that my parents like quote unquote got out from. Right.
Right. Right.
And
Right. Right.
I don't think that white people who are similarly situated in terms of education, income, etc., I don't think that they have those same kind of class anxieties. Which is funny because we all often like in this country, especially the discourse really since like the Trump era has been about how can I say this? Has been so much about like justifying like white misbehavior using
Mm.
like class anxiety as a kind of cover. And I'm like, ain't nobody more class anxious than niggas. Like,
Right.
I don't know.
Right. Right. Okay, we're going to take a quick break and then we'll be right back. Valentine's Day is upon us and I've got love on the brain. Love for books, duh, of course. Hello. Did you forget what podcast you're listening to? I love bringing you all great reads, exclusive author interviews, and behind the scenes book gossip. But I can only do that with your support over on Patreon and Substack. Our Stacks Patreon community, also known as the Stacks Pack, is where you can go for book club meetups, a private, very active Discord, and a year-long mega reading challenge to help you achieve all your reading goals. Plus, you also get that monthly bonus episode. Now, over on the Substack, you can subscribe to my newsletter, Unstacked, where I keep the book conversations going. I also give you a healthy dose of sports and pop culture, definitely some hot takes happening over there. And again, that bonus episode. If you don't have a few dollars to spare, don't worry. There are free options on the Substack and the Patreon to get you a little extra Stacks magic. Making this podcast is a total team effort, and by supporting my Patreon and my Substack, you allow me to support my amazing team that makes the show possible every single week. So if you or your friends are looking to meet other book lovers and support this indie podcast, come hang out with me on Patreon, Substack, or both. I would love to have you. And since we're talking about love, you can gift subscriptions to the Patreon and the Substack for that special reader in your life. For the Stacks Pack, head to patreon.com/thestacks. And for the newsletter, head to tracythomas.substack.com. And also, there are links to both in the show notes. Okay, see you in the Stacks. Okay, we're back. I would talk about this suburban thing forever, but I feel like we also have to talk about poetry allegedly, but we're going to get right off that poetry shit again and get right back into something more interesting. No offense.
No, it's good. It's good.
No.
Well, I was thinking about this thing because you asked this question and I like went into my like professor mode talking about new criticism and shit. And I didn't actually answer your question.
Okay.
What makes a poem good?
Oh yeah.
I don't know if there's like a single answer. The answer for me is I think a poem should sort of function like a tuning fork in that like you strike it and there's a sound or there's a vibration and like even after it sort of stops ostensibly, you still kind of hear it. There's a resonance. right?
Mm,
There's something that like there's a residue, there's something that's sort of sticky about it. For me,
hmm
like that, like those are the poems that draw me, right? I don't necessarily have to
mm,
understand every word or like what is sort of going on in the story of it, but does it have like some resonance? Does it have is it just sticky in that way, right? Whether because
right.
of how it sounds or what it's talking about or the issues that it introduces or whatever.
Yeah. First of all, that's the most poet answer of what makes something good is like a tuning fork that's sticky and da-da. I'm like, okay, go with it. Go off poetry. I agree with you. So you talked about this last time too, like the mathification of poetry, like where there's this one solution or one answer.
Hmm.
And I think that my whole life I had thought of poetry in that way. And like basically until last year when Reginald Dwayne Betts came on the show and basically said, like, if there's one piece of a poem that like sticks with you, like that's a good poem kind of thing. It was just sort of similar to what you're saying.
Hmm.
And ever since like thinking about poetry in that way, I feel like I am able to read it and get a lot more out of it because I'm like, oh, I don't like this one. Doesn't work for me. Bye. I gotta go. And I don't feel this need to like, what are they talking about? What does this word mean? Like I can just be like, oh, this one works. Yay. And like I just like take my like, when I'm reading this, I take my little notes and I'm like, oh, okay, lessons for Cortney. Love this. Like here for this poem or like Jesus piece. Ooh, very interested in this Jesus piece we're talking about. Love jewelry. Or of course, my personal fave
Yeah,
was the poem about the Addie doll because of course that was sticky for me. I had an Addie doll. I'm with you,
absolutely.
Cortney. You know what it's like. So I definitely feel like thinking about poems differently allowed me to like poems more. Like
Yeah.
giving myself permission to be like, oh, I don't get it. I don't have to waste my time with this. Like, I can come back to this poem in 5 years and maybe I will get it, And like, and in every poetry collection, I'm thinking like, oh, I have to love every poem for me to have loved the collection. But now I sort of think out of it like, what percentage of the poems did I really like? And like, if that percentage feels like a lot, like that I like the collection. And if it
Hmm.
feels like not a lot, then I didn't really like it, Like even in your books, like I read Wild Hundreds and I read Finna. And like in both of them, there were poems that I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited. And then there were poems where I was
Hmm.
like, I have no idea what this person is talking about. But like,
Sure.
I thought the collection was great. Like I
Sure.
left it being like, this is so good. And I do have to shout out, you had a poem in Wild Hundreds. I believe that it's called Candy Store. And
Yeah.
I just want to know like where the other snack related poets are, because like that's the kind of poetry that I would like to be reading regularly. Like
See,
there is a big hole in the snack poet market that I
yeah.
would like to see filled with
Yeah.
many more snack related
That
poems.
makes, I mean, I feel like, because you're always asking people, like, what are you eating? What are you drinking?
That's
I'm like,
exactly right.
yeah,
I was like, Candy
this
Store. I have found that between the Addie poem and the Candy Store poem, I just want to say that Chicago poets are doing something very right. You guys
there it
are
is.
very much
There it
tapping
is.
into who I am.
You're like, ah, yes, 90s ephemera and
Yeah.
food.
And food
I'm
and
into it.
delicious. And like specifically Candy Store. Like that's a specific kind of food. It's not broccoli. Like we're not talking about
Right.
the joys of
No,
nature. We are
junk
talking
food.
about junk food.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. So I got a poem for you, and this is actually a
okay.
good one because it also is like a Chicago suburban poem.
Okay. Okay.
Ode to Cheese Fries by Jose Olivares.
Okay. I
Uh,
haven't read any of their work, so I need to do that,
okay,
huh?
yeah, yeah. I'm gonna send you that when we're done because
Okay.
you'll get
Okay.
into that. Yeah.
Okay. Is there a term for poems that are super referential? Because those are the poems that I really like. Like, I like being like, oh, I know what this person's talking about. I'm less interested in someone's interior life. But like, I think of like Hanif has that like great poem about like Michael Jordan,
Oh yeah,
like
about
pushing
pushing off
off or something.
with
Yeah.
yeah, that liar. That yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. This
And
is
like, those,
look.
like, I just love that shit.
Shout out to Neef except for that poem. I
Okay. Oh, right. Because of
I
course,
look. I
Chicago.
like the
Of
poem.
course.
Mike didn't push off.
Okay. It's
I've
fine.
had this conversation with Hanif. Mike didn't push off. Is all I'm saying.
I don't have a
It,
horse in this race. Both you and Hanif have graciously joined this podcast. As I've mentioned, I'm a Warriors fan, so I don't really care. But I just like reading a poem where I'm like, I know what they're talking
yeah, yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah. Well, okay. So, is there a name for that? Kind of the name. Mostly, like people would call like a poem that is like based off of a piece of art, ekphrastic or like ekphrasis.
Frastic.
Yeah,
Wait,
it's spelled
frastic with an F?
no, like
Oh. Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Ekphrasis.
Okay, I've
Ekphrasis.
been
No,
mispronouncing that
no,
for
it's fine.
years.
You're good.
Okay.
You're good. But and so I think of ekphrastic poetry as like also not just being strictly about visual art, but could also be something in conversation self-consciously
Okay.
with some sort of popular art or music or maybe even like a sort of cultural moment or cultural artifact like Michael Jordan not pushing off and triumphing justly over the Utah
Sure,
Jazz,
sure, sure.
or
Hmm.
or whatever, right?
Right. Or a candy store. Sure,
Or a
whatever.
candy store. So I think that's like right. But I think the thing about ekphrastic stuff typically is like it usually is about a specific thing,
Hmm.
right? So it might be like the thing about like when we're talking about the series of poems, all the still lifes, right? That are kind
Right.
of about or using the album cover as a jumping off place.
Did you know all the album covers? There's a few I didn't know.
I let's go through them.
Let's go through 'em. Okay, so
Let's
the
see.
first one is Still Life with the Dropout Bear sitting in the
Yeah,
stands.
easy.
We're
Got
familiar.
it. Got it.
Still Life with Kendrick Lamar's Mama's Van. Okay,
Yeah.
in the title. Got it.
Yeah.
Still Life with Crooked Painting and Bullet Holes in Grayscale. I didn't have this one.
Wait, let me look at the poem. I don't know it just off the
I
title, but let
think that he
me.
says almost always who the person is towards the end.
Oh, that's I think the Slim Shady LP or Marshall Mathers.
Oh,
It's
okay.
one of those. Let me look
Okay.
at it. I'm a Google.
Okay.
Continue.
The next one is Still Life with Torso of Corn Road Neo Soul Singer. I think that's D'Angelo, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't even, is that the album or is that just the
It must be the album, right?
yeah, but it could just be the video. It's interesting.
Oh, sure.
I don't know. I
I
think
mean,
yeah,
D'Angelo loved to be topless.
yeah.
So
Danez Smith has like this great poem that I think is like where they sort of talk about like seeing the Untitled video and like trying to like look down the TV.
Oh,
Um
Danez is all of us.
yes, I mean fair, reasonable. Damn, I don't actually
Okay.
I don't know if I know what this one is. I don't know.
Okay, what about Still Life with Woman and Balloons in Noir? I didn't know that one.
Yeah, I don't know actually. I don't remember. I mean, I'm sure I know the album, but I just can't. I have like a
Courtney, if you're
very
listening, which I doubt you are, but if you are, will you please DM me all the answers? Okay.
Yeah, Courtney better listen. I'm gonna text him after this and be like, "Yo, give me all the albums." Please.
Okay, Still Life with Color Orange, we know is Channel Orange.
Right.
Still Life with Young Black Woman's face etched into a school desk. Is that Miseducation?
That's Miseducation.
I never realized that that's what that was an image of. I've seen that a million times. Still Life with light-skinned rapper wearing newsboy cap. Common, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
I must be Common.
That
Still Life with Black boy's face overlaying project buildings. Is that Nas? Is that Illmatic?
Yeah, that's Illmatic.
And then Still Life with skateboarding rapper orbited by nerd paraphernalia. I think he says that's Lupe
That's
Fiasco.
NERD. Wait, no, that's Lupe. You're right. That is Lupe.
I think he says it in it that it's Lupe. There's
That
like
is-
a line.
yes,
Because I
that's
would
Lupe.
not have known that.
Yeah, that's Lupe, but it could also be like one of the NERD, like the description would actually I think also fit
Right.
one of the Neptune's albums. But yeah, that's Lupe. That's the first Lupe record.
So we only don't know two for sure. The balloons one and then the bullet hole one.
Yeah. Yeah.
You'll get me answers. We'll get to the bottom of this, people. I'm sure people are listening right now screaming at their radio or their phone or whatever,
They're
being
like,
like, you idiots. I get so many, whenever I do this and I don't know the answer to something, then I get all these DMs. But then the best part is in like 6 months, someone is going to DM me and be like, hey, I listened to the episode and it's this album. After like 6 days of people just barraging me, I'm going to get like, I got something like last month for something from January 2021 being like, I didn't see it updated on your website. I was like, I'm gonna update it. What am I gonna say? I got the answer.
Y'all know I keep doing these things. I'm not just like making one.
Just like waiting.
Like
I can't do another episode until someone tells me the answer. But I appreciate it, so please do tell me. But I always laugh when someone does it like a year later. Like, okay, I got it. I
feel like, look, if you don't do it, you have like a week. You're like a
A
week
week.
to
Okay.
clarify. After that,
Yeah.
if you want to like, if you want to use this as like some sort of excuse to like talk to me, then like make a joke about it or like make some
Yeah.
other comment because I obviously have this information already, or I don't need it.
Yeah.
Like
No,
it's not messed
exactly.
up my life.
It's so social media is such a crazy place because before I had this show, only interacted with people I knew, and now I interact with so many strangers, which I love and like is like generally pretty fun. But sometimes I'm like, you guys don't know, you guys have no. You really think I haven't found this information?
Yeah.
Like I didn't immediately go and Google it as we're done. So everyone, you have a week from today. Today is April 27th. You have a week. So if the next episode of the Stacks is appearing on your Stacks feed, do not message me.
Yeah,
But
we're
if it
good.
hasn't yet, then feel free to let me know.
Right. And also you can only like say anything in the DMs if you subscribe.
Yes. Oh
Right.
yeah. If you're
Don't be
not
like cherry
subscribed.
picking episodes and
Yeah.
then be
And
like,
please follow also.
yeah. And no one has time for that. No one has time for you non-subscribers.
Yeah, I need
Like,
you.
rate, review, all that. Come on.
I bet about 100 people are just going to unsubscribe after this rant. They're going to be like, she's an ungrateful bitch. She doesn't care
Yeah.
about my hot takes. Well, whatever. Bye. I'll miss you.
Yeah.
Come back eventually. Okay, wait. I have something else I wanted to ask you about.
Yes.
This is like sort of a heady poetry question.
Okay. Love it.
They're probably not an answer, but one of the things about poetry that I have mentioned many times that I like is I like form. I'm very curious about form, which is why I like a guzzle or a gazelle or whatever the fuck that is.
Yeah.
I talk about iambic pentameter a lot. I love that. I love a poem that rhymes. I love a rhyming couplet. I even like it when it's every other, like a limerick style. I like that. I like when I can catch the rhythm and it goes. I also like when there's a rhythm and it changes. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
And you do a thing that I need answers about, which is,
Okay.
and Cortney does this a little bit, but you do it a lot. You make poems that visually look a certain way. So like whether it's like a triangle that becomes, or like a diamond shape, like with the
Sure.
words on the page, or like, I think Cortney does this too, where it's like everything is indented left, but then like a little paragraph will be like moved to the right. And that's form, like visual form. And I want to know about line endings and also about the visual form of a poem. Like, how are you imagining that I'm supposed to be reading this? And how do you perform it? How can you perform a triangle? Does it change how you think about reading the poem out loud if you were going to perform it somewhere?
That's a great question. Dang. So the answer is it depends. Sorry.
I
but
knew this was coming.
no, so a thing I was thinking about this before when you were talking about your relationship to poems and like really loving some poems in the collection and then other ones being like, I don't really know what this means. Whatever, moving on. Um, a thing I tell my students is that the poem that you write on the page, like that's really kind of sheet music. And so the song itself, like the thing that really is actually the poem, is what happens when that music gets interpreted, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
when someone sits down to play it on a piano or on a different instrument or sing it or whatever, and we understand that each of those things, though it might be quote unquote the same song, is a different experience, right? Constitutes a different
Mhm.
experience.
Mhm.
Um, and so, that's why I really like the thing you said about, if I don't like it, maybe I'll come back to it in 5 years and it'll mean something different to me, and I'll really like it. Um, I love that sort of the open invitation of that because, like, if I'm like sitting down to play, I don't Stevie Wonder's "Love's in Need of Love" on a piano and I can't play it, that doesn't mean the song is whack. It means
Right.
I just happen to have not
Yeah.
played piano since like I was 9, and so I'm not very
Right.
good.
Right.
Um, but and I think that poetry works a lot of the same ways. So setting that aside, for me, the physical thing of the page is it's just like it's another way that you can give people information, right? It's another way that you can offer something to folks, right? So sometimes I might write a poem that has a kind of like that does a physical thing on the page, and that is meant to mimic something that's happening in the poem, right? So there's a poem in Finna called like Only Boy where stanzas are inverted, right? So stanzas are literally like flipped upside down.
I was just looking at that one.
Yeah. And one of the reason why that is because that poem is sort of like one of the kind of major images or kind of things in the poem is like people playing double dutch, right? Which is like a big thing where I grew up, like on my block. And I had all sisters, right? And so double dutch was like a whole thing. And so what it requires is that when you read it, you kind of have to turn the book in the way you have to turn a rope, right? So it mimics the thing. So that can sometimes be what I'm trying to do. Sometimes like having a line a certain length or having lines of varying lengths or the same length can speed people's reading experience up or slow it down, or it can make something into a joke, right?
But you are
create...
signaling something to your reader.
Like
you're telling me something about this poem is different than something about the previous poem. Like how you want me to read it and engage with it.
Yeah.
Like that I need to make a different choice.
Well, not even that you have to make a different choice. I'm just pointing out to you, it's like a different experience, right? Okay. Each poem is like a slightly, they're all a part of a single experience, but like that single experience has many different components in the same way that like, if you're in a relationship, you know, sometimes it's, you know, you have moments that are very passionate and very whatever. Right. Sometimes you have moments that are like objectively whack. Right, and bad. And a lot of stuff is sort of in between. But like if you think of your relationship or your friendship or whatever, you have like an overall feeling about it, but you can then also parse these individual moments. And like that's for me like what a poem is. It's like the distillation of just a moment.
Sure. Right. So for me, as again, a person who loves form and rules and regulations, and like that's just part of my personality. Again, I love Shakespeare because I like the iambic pentameter. I get mad when I see a Shakespeare play and they don't use the iambic pentameter and they just read the lines through. Like there's an end of the line for a reason. And so when I read poems, I feel very strongly that like the end of the line of the text is a choice by the poet and that should be respected. And so when I read poems, oftentimes I take a quick breath at the end of the poem, even if it's just really quick. Like same thing with Shakespeare. Like a lot of people know, you know, Shakespeare texts that are multiple lines, but like a good actor will clip it at that 10th syllable. But sometimes when I hear poets read their own poems, they don't fucking do that. So then I'm like, well, why did you make the line end there? Why would you make that choice? So if you don't have to, you're not forced, because you could do the thing where it goes to the next line, which you've done in other poems. And so I just feel like I am so rigid. I'm such a rigid person that like, this is one of the reasons that poetry is really hard for me, because I'm like trying to read into like, okay, like I'm looking at your poem step and it's like 3 lines on this side. And then the next 3 lines are indented a different way. And I'm like, how do I read this? Like, how do I make a choice? And I don't know. So I'm wondering if like you're thinking about when you're writing it, if you're writing it because it feels a way to write it, or if you're thinking about me or someone else reading it and how it feels to read it, or not, or both, or neither.
Yeah. Well, I was to say when I write
or if I'm
poems,
just being so neurotic.
No, you're good. You're good. I dig it. When I write poems, I just make the line breaks wherever. It's just vibes. I'm just like, oh, this looks like a poem to me. Like if I'm handwriting or if I'm like typing it, I'm just like, this feels like a line breaking time.
I really want this also for Robert Frost and like who all those other people. Like, I just really want to go to his journals and be like, I put my line breaks where the vibes are. Thank you.
You know, the vibes. I'm a professor, so that shit is, you know, you can take that to the bank.
I love this for all of us.
But all my second drafts, like for the most part, look like a single block of text.
Okay. Because
after I like experience the vibes, then I'm kind of like, okay, now I actually have to make decisions like an adult. And at that point, then I start to think about, is there some kind of organizing principle that I can use? Is there something here that I can think through? So like, for example, one of the earliest poems I ever published, which is not a very good poem, is about Rahm Emanuel, who is the old mayor of Chicago, who sucked. But
he's famous for being Obama's chief of staff as well.
Yeah, that. He also cussed a lot, right? And that was kind of the thing. Yeah. So I wrote this poem when he was, I think, being elected. Okay. like he was when he announced he was going to run or whatever. And the thing about the poem is because he had this sort of reputation for being really profane in the Clinton and Obama White House, I think in that poem, like it's like built around fours, right? Because of, like a 4-letter word, right?
4-letter word.
One, rhymes a 4-letter word, which is funny to me. Two,
Okay.
yeah. And so then like all the stanzas were 4 lines long. Most of the lines were 4 words long, this kind of stuff. But like, I didn't come up with that. At first I was just writing this sort of silly poem about this politician. And then I'm like, oh, wait a second. There's this thing that I can do to like give it a little more depth. But the reason why, like, aside from just being like people are bad readers or they don't pay attention to their own stuff, one of the reasons why I think like you may hear a poet read and that feels like a really different experience than what it is on the page is it is a different experience.
Sure.
And, in the same way that like I think about poems as like being sheet music, right? And so that means that the sheet music is one component of it, then the actual player, like whoever's engaging with the thing or bringing it to life, whether that's happening in your own head or in a reading out loud or some other kind of presentational thing, those are the things that make up the poem, that make up your experience of the poem. And so I don't think reading my book is a different experience than like seeing me read from my book, and it should be.
Right.
Like it's fundamentally different. That's
right.
Okay.
But poets who like read their work and like it's not what they've written. Like it's like the words are the same, but it's like, are you going to take a breath? Like,
yeah,
that's supposed to rhyme. Like what's happened? Like, so I don't know. I think some of it is also I have a performance background. And so I think about performance in a very like intense. I mean, I think about a lot of things in an intense way. You heard my podcast.
A fidelity to the performance.
Well, and I like a script. I like a text. I like with sheet music, I like when someone does what is written, and then when you break from it, it feels special. I feel like when someone is just riffing from jump, I'm like, okay, well, can we get back to the root of the thing? Because if you're riffing on the first line, it's like, okay, well, where are we going and
you're
why
like,
are we here?
Yeah,
is this
like
the
a social
song?
contract has been broken.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so when I like sometimes will hear people like read a poem and I'm like, you're reading this poem the same way you read the other poem and they're written totally different in your book. Yeah. So what you're telling me is that you don't think that your writing is important, or you don't think that your performance is important. Like you're not showing the respect to the work that you've done. I don't know. But again, I have such an intense relationship to the text because of the years that I spent studying Shakespeare and like studying and like, there's a whole art form to doing iambic pentameter that involves staying faithful to, like, for example, I think I use this all the time. The first line of Richard III is now is the winter of our discontent. And iambically, it should be now is the winter, but everyone performs it now is the winter of our discontent. And that is a choice that Shakespeare made to break the form from the beginning because he knew that people would know that it was supposed to be iambic. So when you do now is the winter, like you're really drawing people in. And people who like, if you don't understand iambic pentameter, you're not going to get that. But people who get it, it's like a major moment. Same as like to be or not to be. That is a famous line, but it also breaks the iambic pentameter. And so I feel like when poets don't trust their work, I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? You wrote this book and now you're just reading it like you're reading the newspaper. Like, and there's 7,000 lines. And each line only has 4 syllables. And why are you reading it like, hello, I went to the store today? Like, no, motherfucker, it's supposed to be like, hello, I went to the store today. Like,
see, I love that you're like that you have like such strong feelings about this.
I do. I have such strong feelings about the form because when I pick up the book, I'm so insecure about my reading of poetry that I am relying on that way of writing to inform how I should be reading it. I'm like looking to the author to guide me. And so when I feel like, and then when I see them do it and I'm like, that's not at all what I thought we were getting at here. I feel like, oh no, I got the math problem wrong.
Sure.
Anyways, I feel like maybe I need to go to poet therapy for this.
Oh, it's good. It's good.
Okay, we're like so out of time. Just the last thing really quickly. We sort of talked about the title, but we always talk about the title and the cover. And I just love to know your quick thoughts about those two things. And then we can skedaddle.
Yeah. I mean, I love this title. I think it's one, I think it's funny, and I also think it does the work of the book, which is like really think through how a speaker or many speakers potentially like reconcile kind of who they are and the sort of path that they are finding for themselves, and the past that they feel are sort of prescribed by them by society, right? And those paths can be like contradictory and whatever, right? And so I think there's something about the pun that does it. And Courtney's first book has a kind of punny title. I wonder if like this is just going to be his thing, like
his thing.
Yeah, because the first one was like telepathologies.
Okay.
And so I'm like, okay, fam, like you just go
just words none of us like, can spell. Also, forever. Good luck.
Right, he's just like stunning on us,
trolling
like,
me,
winning spelling bees.
Yeah.
So I really love the title. I really like the image. The one thing, and this is like not at all like obviously like not at all a diss or whatever. Like I have a great affection for the book and the poet and the poems, but I wish it was like more contrasting.
Same.
Yes, because I always think about like how
I literally could not see it.
Yes.
When I went to order the book, I was like, what the fuck is on this book? Like, I could not figure out. It wasn't until it actually got into my home and I looked at it for a while that I was like, oh, it's a person with their hands and then their mouth is open and like they kind of fade into the background, but you really can't see them. Like, it's so hard to see. And it is like a very cool image. And maybe they're flipping us off. Like, it's hard to know for sure the details of all of the art. And it's a bummer because I feel like it should pop more.
Yeah, I'm very particular about like matte books versus glossy, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is a cover that would translate better if it were matte.
It was matte, yeah. Is your first book, I read your first book on my Kindle. Is your first book matte also? So
the first couple printings of it were, I think now they might all be glossy, but they sort of went back and forth. But I think that image, I don't know. I like that image.
I love your book covers. I think that I was going to say that I think that I was imagining it as a glossy cover, but now that you said that, I'm like, oh, I bet it would be even cooler in matte. That's what I was wondering. Yeah. But I also like the colors of that cover are so good. Like it's just like, and it has the contrast that you need. Like like it's a blue background, right? Yeah. I'm like, I'm trying to remember.
Honestly, like shout out my older sister. Who does hair, because like she was sort of the one that I had like a couple images that I was thinking about, and the way that we picked that image, I was like asking people who I knew, but like the thing that clinched it for me is she was, I think, in a shop working, and I was like, yo, here's like these 5 photos or these 5 pictures, like which one do you like, and ask everyone in the shop like which one sort of. And like that was like pretty the clear consensus, and I was like, bet, cool. Yeah, and actually, one of the ones I didn't use ended up being Hanif's like first book cover. So.
Oh really?
Yeah. Like
just recycling cover images.
Well, no, I had posted like after the book came out, maybe at some point months after the book came out, I was like, oh yeah, like shout out Max Sansing, who's like a great artist, who did my book cover, and here's a couple other ones that I thought about that almost were the cover. And then Hanif was like, yo, what's that one talking about? And I was like, oh yeah, I can put y'all in touch. Like that's not a problem. So yeah.
I love that. Wait, you're in the spades game in Hanif's latest book, right?
Yeah, where he's like, Nate is almost certainly better than me. Yeah, the most important moment in American literature. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, that's what I just now dawning on me. I know Dinez is in it, but I couldn't remember who the other poets were. Okay, we have to go. We'll do this on another episode. We'll talk about the spades game.
Yes,
Nate. Thank you so much. This was so fun. I didn't ever think talking about poetry would be so fun. My blood pressure is up from the whole form conversation, but I think we'll get it back together. I had to go take a nap or something, go do yoga. Everyone, you can get Nate's books wherever you get them. Binna, Wild Hundreds. He's also the editor on the Breakbeat Poets Anthology. He's got plays.
Yeah.
He's You could go to Colorado and you could be a student. There's many ways. You could also just find him on social media.
That's
but
true.
if you are going to message him, you have 1 week to do it. Otherwise, you're cut off.
I mean, just message me about like other things. Ask me about
other
the
things.
Chicago White Sox. Message me about the White Sox.
Yes, sure. Don't do that. But baseball will have started by the time this airs. So go Giants. Everyone else, we will see you in the stacks. All right, y'all, that does it for us this week. Thank you for listening. And thank you so much to Nate Marshall for being our guest. And now it is a moment you've been waiting for, the announcement of our May book club pick. I am so excited. We are going to be reading a brand new book. It's called Shine Bright, A Very Personal History of Black Women in Pop. It's by Danielle Smith. And I cannot wait for you all to find out who our guest is going to be for this conversation. Be sure to tune in next week to find out. If you love The Stacks and want inside access to it, head to patreon.com/The Stacks to join The Stacks Pack. Make sure you're subscribed to The Stacks wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you're listening through Apple Podcasts or Spotify, be sure to leave us a rating and a review. For more from The Stacks, follow us on social media at The Stacks Pod on Instagram and at The Stacks Pod _ on Twitter. And check out our website, thestackspodcast.com. This episode of The Stacks was edited by Christian Duenas, came with production assistance from Lauren Tyree. Our graphic designer is Robin McCrite, and our theme music is from Tagirajis. The Stacks is created and produced by me, Tracy Thomas.